Hello there and welcome to our nightly news program coming to you live on All 24 News here from Algiers. I'm your host, Karim Zakaria. Next up are the headlines. President Tebboune chairs a meeting of the High Security Council devoted to the assessment of the general situation in the country. Also coming up, clashes erupt again in the Sudanese capital Khartoum after a short ceasefire, and many countries launch rescue operations to evacuate their nationals. Also ahead in our news, world leaders expressed concern during UN Security Council meeting over rising conflict between major powers, highlighting need for peaceful solutions, while the EU plans to purchase ammunition for Ukraine. And China says it respects the status of the independent sovereign nations that emerged from the collapse of the Soviet Union after Beijing's envoy to Paris sparked controversy by questioning their sovereignty. Hello again and welcome to the program. First off in our news, President of the Republic, Supreme Head of the Armed Forces, Minister of National Defense, Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, chaired on Monday in Algiers a meeting of the High Security Council devoted to the assessment of the general situation in the country, according to a press release from the Presidency of the Republic. The Algerian Foreign Ministry announced on Monday the launch of an evacuation operation for its diplomats and citizens from Khartoum after clashes had increased between the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces. The decision comes as part of ensuring the safety of the Algerian community in Sudan, according to a statement by the Algerian Foreign Ministry. The same source stated that all means have been provided for the success of this operation, adding that Algeria is following closely the situation in the brotherly country through a crisis cell that was formed for this purpose. The statement also called on the Algerian citizens in Sudan to be extremely cautious and to remain in constant communication with the ministry about their situation. In the same context, clashes have erupted again in the Sudanese capital Khartoum after a short ceasefire that was called on by the international community. Many countries have launched rescue operations during the last 3 days to evacuate their nationals. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation remains critical in many regions of Sudan as the conflict tightens access to water and foodstuffs. Usama Ayadi with more.
In the Sudanese capital Khartoum, as surrounding areas remain at stake after the rise of death toll in the country to 420 people, with over 3,700 wounded civilians in less than 2 weeks. The civil society remains in severe humanitarian situation, with dwindling food supplies and sometimes total absence of running water.
Sudanese people are afraid that there might be unethical practices in the work and using civilians as a human shield. There are fears from the evacuation of expats.
The World Health Organization has repeatedly warned of the severe conditions for delivering additional medical support, as well as the impossibility of reaching some areas where people grapple with blackouts and shortages.
Sudanese people are in shock. We weren't expecting to be in this situation. The condition we are in right now is the beginning of displacement, and we are dignified people, and the situation will humiliate us. God protect the Sudanese and protect Sudan. We say no to the war.
In addition to many warnings from the international community, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres also underlined that the violence in Sudan could engulf the whole region and beyond.
Since the start of fighting on 15 April, hundreds of people have been killed and thousands injured. The violence must stop. It risks a catastrophic conflagration within Sudan that could engulf the whole region and beyond.
Clashes erupted again on Monday afternoon in many regions of Sudan after partial calm had prevailed for evacuation and humanitarian reasons. Many countries had successfully evacuated their nationals and embassy staffs from the country at a time when many other countries have called on the conflicting parties to extend the ceasefire to allow more civilians to be evacuated.
The European Union top diplomat Josep Borrell stated on Monday that the bloc will keep working for a political settlement in the conflict in Sudan. Josep Borrell also expressed fears that the Sudanese conflict will expand to send shockwaves throughout the whole continent of Africa.
And I want to thank the combined efforts of many countries that took their nationals, but also all nationals that they could pick. So it has been a successful operation, but complex. I was in touch with the two generals fighting in Sudan. And now the ceasefire has stopped, it's over. We have to continue pushing for a political settlement. We cannot afford that Sudan, which is a very populated country, implodes, because it will be sending shockwaves around the whole Africa.
In the same context, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said on Monday that the United States is pressing Sudanese military leaders to expand a ceasefire and is exploring options to return a diplomatic consular presence to the country as soon as possible. He also added that U.S. officials were continuing to engage directly with Sudanese military leaders. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of the army and leader of Sudan's ruling council since 2019, and his deputy on the council, RSF leader General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, commonly known as Hamidati.
Good morning, everyone. We've also continued to engage directly with General Burhan and General Hamidati to press them to extend and expand the Eid ceasefire to a sustainable cessation of hostilities that prevents further violence and upholds humanitarian obligations. The Sudanese people are not giving up on their aspirations for a secure, free, and democratic future. Neither will we.
To other topical regional news, as a special envoy of Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune, Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Mr. Ahmed Attaf, arrived on Monday in the Mauritanian capital Nouakchott on a working visit that comes as part of the dynamics to strengthen relations, cooperation and coordination between the two brotherly countries. Minister Ahmed Attaf held bilateral talks with his Mauritanian counterpart, Mr. Mohamed Salem Weld Merzoug. The two sides praised the level of progress achieved in joint projects and reviewed the road project linking Algerian city of Tindouf and Mauritanian Zouirat due to its strategic importance. The two ministers also signed a memorandum of understanding of political consultations aimed at establishing a sustainable mechanism to enhance political coordination between the two brotherly countries. Tunisian authorities announced the recovery of 31 bodies of irregular migrants. Tunisian authorities managed to curb 6 irregular migration operations and the rescue of 186 migrants of sub-Saharan African nationals who were in the process of crossing the maritime borders from several regions of the country. In Africa still, Kenyan President William Ruto condemned the priest at the center of the deadly starvation cult as the toll rose at least to 58 on Monday. Police confirmed that they had recovered 58 bodies, mostly from mass graves in a forest in eastern Kenya, thought to be followers of a Christian cult who believed they would go to heaven if they starved themselves. The Kenyan Red Cross declared that 112 people have been reported missing to a tracing and counseling desk it has set up at a local hospital.
The government of Kenya and I have instructed the agencies responsible to take up the matter and to get to the root cause and to the bottom of the activities of religious or people who want to use religion to advance weird, unacceptable ideology.
People wearing the uniforms of Burkinabe armed forces killed nearly 60 civilians on Friday, local prosecutors said on Sunday. According to the prosecutor, the attack took place in the village of Karma in Yatenga province, and an investigation had been launched right after the attack, offering no further details. On Monday, at a summit, 7 European Union countries, including France, Germany and the Netherlands, alongside non-EU countries, are set to pledge to expand renewable energy in Belgium's coastal town of Ostend to strengthen energy security around the growing underwater electricity grid, so it cannot fall victim to hybrid threats. Selma Nassib reports.
A group of Western European nations, led by Germany and France, are committed to massively upgrade the production of clean energy from wind turbines in the North Sea to both meet climate targets and reduce their strategic energy dependence on Russia. The leaders also vowed to improve security around the growing underwater electricity grid so it cannot fall victim to hybrid threats. The summit in Belgium's North Sea port of Ostend is the second one to address the ever more pressing issue, as according to the Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, the 9 countries are aiming for a combined 130 gigawatts of North Sea offshore wind capacity by 2030 and to more than double 300 gigawatts by 2050.
We aim for a capacity of 130 gigawatts by 2030, 300 gigawatts by 2050. By then, we will be able to provide electricity for 300 million households on the European continent.
The meeting also has a strategic goal in order to increase security around offshore wind farms and the underwater cable system to bring the energy to shore. Therefore, French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that the group wants to secure the whole industry due to its importance in developing offshore wind energy.
We want to secure the whole industry, and it is important to develop offshore wind energy. But let's not repeat the mistake we sometimes made in the past, being it deploying equipment that was manufactured on the other side of the globe. So we want also to create more jobs on the European land by implementing these offshore turbines. This is at the heart of our commitments.
The aim is also to curb reliance on Russian gas and reduce CO2 emitting fossil fuels, which remain dominant.
Our reform of the electricity market design will incentivize the use of renewable compared to fossil fuels.
European Union discussed during the summit and committed that 42.5% of total energy consumption should come from renewables by 2030, on the way to becoming a climate-neutral bloc by 2050.
8 people were killed and many others were injured after 2 explosions rocked a counter-terrorism office in northwest Pakistan on Monday. According to police, most of those killed were police counter-terrorism officers. It was not clear yet what caused the explosions. However, there was an old ammunition store in the office, and probe was launched to confirm whether that caused the explosion or it was an attack. No one has so far claimed responsibility. Russia says that its forces repelled a drone attack on its Black Sea fleet stationed in the Crimean port of Sebastopol in the early hours of Monday without any casualties or losses, adding that it destroyed all 3 of the naval drones, Sebastopol, which is on the Crimean Peninsula, that Russia annexed in 2014, has come under repeated air attacks since Russia launched its military operation in Ukraine last February.
Today at about 3:30 a.m. local time, the Kiev regime tried to attack the base of the Black Sea Fleet in Sebastopol with 3 unnamed high-speed boats. The Russian anti-sabotage forces destroyed all 3 enemy's drones as they were approaching Sebastopol harbor. There were no losses.
Despite the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine in the region, Sebastopol has largely been seen as a safe haven for locals and tourists alike. However, this recent spate of drone attacks has shattered this perception and has left many residents feeling vulnerable and uncertain about the future.
When the drones attack, it wakes you up, of course. There is nowhere you can sleep peacefully. The house shakes. You worry for your children. But we are confident that the anti-missile system works well. And that Sevastopol is well protected.
World leaders expressed concern during UN Security Council meeting over rising conflict between major powers, highlighting the need for peaceful solutions, while the EU plans to purchase ammunition for Ukraine to support them in their ongoing conflict with Russia. Sofian Kanturi has more details.
Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed concern during the UN Security Council meeting about the increasing risk of conflict between major world powers, calling it a historic high. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov went even further, warning that the world may be approaching a point that is possibly even more dangerous than during the Cold War. The remarks highlight the growing tension and instability in global politics and the urgent need for leaders to work towards finding peaceful solutions to these issues.
Distinguished colleagues, as was the case for the Cold War, we have reached a dangerous, possibly even more dangerous threshold.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres criticized Russia for launching a military operation in Ukraine, saying it had devastated the nation and contributed to the coronavirus pandemic's effects on the global economy.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, in violation of the United Nations Charter and international law, is causing massive suffering and devastation to the country and its people, and adding to the global economic dislocation triggered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
In another meeting that took place in Luxembourg, the EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell has announced that the bloc is on track to finalize a plan to purchase ammunition for Ukraine. Borrell expressed confidence that the plan will be completed within the next few days.
Yes, there is some disagreement, but I'm sure everybody will understand that we are in a situation of extreme urgency. I'm sure that in the following days we will reach, but while we look for this legal agreement, don't believe that we are just sitting and waiting. The whole work is going on. The whole work is going on. So once the legal agreement will be reached, the practical work will be finished.
The world is indeed at critical juncture, and diplomacy and cooperation are more important than ever. The recent remarks by Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov highlight the urgent need for leaders to find peaceful solutions to rising tensions in global politics.
The Kremlin said on Monday that President Vladimir Putin would decide whether to attend a BRICS conference in South Africa in August, closer to the time. South Africa is a party to the International Criminal Court and known about its good relations with Russia, but would be theoretically required to arrest Putin under an ICC indictment issued in March. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau welcomed German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier to Ottawa on Monday for a 4-day visit that will include discussions on security, economy, and climate. According to the Prime Minister's office, much of the conversation between the two countries is expected to focus on Russia's war on Ukraine and ways to provide ongoing support for Ukraine, including other topics on the broader impact of the war, as well as fighting climate change and highlighting trade ties.
We know that we have to defend our democracies against external threats, but also because of internal threats. And so therefore, I'm very, very happy. I really appreciate that you were inviting me for discussions with young students today.
China on Monday said it respects the status of the independent sovereign nations that emerged from the collapse of the Soviet Union after Beijing's envoy to Paris sparked controversy by questioning their sovereignty. EU's top diplomat praised China's move to distance itself from the ambassador's remarks. Here's Zahra Fujani.
Seeking to contain a diplomatic uproar after Beijing's ambassador to France, Liu Shai, appeared to question the status of former Soviet republics under international law, China now says it respects their sovereignty and integrity. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said there had been no change in Beijing's position, distancing China from the comments of its envoy to Paris.
China's position on relevant issues remains unchanged. As to issues related to territorial sovereignty, China's position is consistent and clear. China respects all countries' sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity, and upholds the purposes and principles of the UN Charter.
This came after several European Union foreign ministers had described the aforementioned comments as unacceptable and asked Beijing to clarify its stance.
Well, first of all, it's completely unacceptable. And later today, 3 Baltic states will be summoning representatives, in our case the Charge d'Affaires, in other capitals is the ambassador, to ask for clarification.
It's totally and totally unacceptable. We are denouncing such a statement, and I hope that the bosses of this ambassador will make things straight.
For his part, European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, welcomed China's decision to distance itself from the ambassador's remarks, describing it good news.
And I want to signal that Beijing has distanced itself from the unacceptable remark of its ambassador to Paris. I hope that these statements or remarks by the ambassador were not the official position of China, and now we have a concrete answer that it's not. So it's a good news.
According to analysts, the tensions between Beijing and the EU is connected to the rivalry between China and the US, especially in light of the geopolitical and strategic shifts sparked by the war in Ukraine and the developments in Taiwan.
Military spending in Europe recorded an unprecedented rise in 2022 as it reached a record level not seen in the continent since the Cold War, after the war in Ukraine. A study by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute showed that the increase in European spending on armies also doubled in light of Western military supplies to Ukraine. Islam Said reports.
Amid the wars and the geopolitical crises the world is witnessing, race towards arming has increased, reaching an extraordinary record since the end of the Cold War. According to statistics released by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, global military spending at the end of 2022 amounted to more than $2 trillion, almost 4% increase compared to 2021. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, Europe's spending military budget has increased by 13%, which is the largest in 30 years. Central and Western Europe spent $345 billion last year, exceeding for the first time spending in 1989. As for the United Kingdom, it had the highest military spending, with more than $68 billion. Armed spending in Finland has seen the largest increase in the continent by 36%, followed by Lithuania by 27%, then Sweden by 12%, and Poland by 11%. Away from Europe, Australia's defense funding will increase over the next decade, but will stay steady over the next 4 years at $12.7 billion, $5.2 billion diverted from cancelled projects.
This represents a document for today and tomorrow. It is the most significant work that's been done since the Second World War, looking in a comprehensive way at what is needed. It demonstrates that in a world where challenges to our national security are always evolving, we cannot fall back on old assumptions.
On the other hand, Russia's military spending increased by 9%, with a budget amounting to more than $86 billion by the end of 2022. But the highest increase in military spending remains for Ukraine, which amounted to $44 billion by the end of 2022, an increase of 640% from 2021, making it the highest military funding ever recorded. The war in Ukraine has put many countries, including the United States, before an additional burden. In fact, Washington spent nearly $20 billion as a military support for Kiev, which is the heaviest military aid ever provided to a single country since the Cold War.
For more news making headlines around the globe, here's the news in brief.
Industrial action grounded dozens of flights at 2 major German airports on Monday, as security workers and ground services employees in the capital, Berlin, and in Hamburg held a one-day strike over pay.
Armenia marked the 108th anniversary of the mass killings of Armenians in the Ottoman Empire on Sunday and Monday. Just a new round of escalation in Karabakh has started.
Former UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon met Myanmar's military ruler as part of a surprise trip aimed at promoting peace in a country racked by conflict since a coup 2 years ago.
And finally in our news, 6 highly rare first edition collections of William Shakespeare's plays will go on show in London next week in what auction house Christie says will be the largest display of the works in Britain. The exhibition, which marks the 400th anniversary of the publication of Shakespeare's first folio in 1623, runs in Christie's London showroom from May 2nd until May 26th. The copies will then go back to their owners.
If we didn't have the publication of the first folio, it is very likely that half of Shakespeare's entire output, so 18 plays, would not exist. And these include plays such as Macbeth, Julius Caesar, All is Well That Ends Well. It's just amazing to think that there would be a world in which these plays don't exist and all their famous lines.
Well, that's all for now. For more stories, you can always check our social media platforms. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.